Okay, so here is the dorsal side of the mink. So that's the back side. You can see the tail, and its four limbs. You'll notice on the limbs that their claws have been cut, and that's obviously because they're extremely sharp. They've already been skinned. Minks are essentially taken for their fur, and they're used on mink farms, and so that's where we get them from. If you'll take a look here, this is the ventral side, so you can see the abdomen down here, and then moving up you can see some patches of fat opening where they've set up the dye, and then there is this sponge in the mouth because the teeth are very sharp. All right, so taking a look at the dorsal side here, let's see if I can avoid the shadow here. Grab my probe. So we're looking at, we've got the pectoralis. This would be like our pec major muscle, and this would be the pec minor on the angle here going down. And then you can see here I cut to the deep side on the left side, and we're starting to look at some of the muscles of the shoulder that I'm going to start to reveal out as well. Okay, up here in there is called in the mink, is called the sternomastoid muscle, which is kind of like its primary neck muscle. All right, so we're going to take a look at the abs here. Let's see if we can get a good view of this. So right down the middle, as we recall, those are your rectus abdominis muscles, and they are the same with your little linea alba line running down the middle there. And then on the sides here, you obviously have your external obliques on both sides. Remember, oblique meaning on an angle. We have peeled away a bit here, so I'm just going to kind of fold back part of this external oblique and hold that down while I also do this, if I can. You can see these fibers running underneath here where I have the probe. No, you can't see it because I'm down there. Yes, you can. So these fibers down here, that shows the internal oblique muscles. And then we're going to move just right up here to where I have cut away some of the rectus abdominis muscle here. And then below that, you have the transverse abdominis. So you have the four layers of abdominal muscles. Rectus is what I'm pointing at here, transversus underneath, external obliques on the outside, and then internal obliques located right here on the inside. Okay, let's take a look at the arm here. Hopefully we can see this decently. So what you have up here would be your bicep. That's what we would find in us. Below here you have the tricep, and it's broken up into a couple of different pieces. That's the tricep brachii. And then let's take a look at the forearm. So we have this kind of thin superficial muscle right here that I'm lifting off. That's the brachioradialis. Then you have extensor carpi radialis longus. That is next. Sorry for the shadow here. Home video quality at its best. After that, extensor carpi radialis longus. You have got pronator teres. Let me see if I'm in there right. Yes. Flexor carpi radialis would be following that. Palmaris longus is right here, and then this nice big flat one is your flexor carpi ulnaris, and so those are your medial on the ventral side forearm muscles. Okay, so let's take a look at the leg without trying to totally darken it up here. So down here where the probe is at, you are looking at the semitendinosus muscle. Above that you have the semimembranosus muscle located here. You can see a bit of a nerve plexus here, which we're not talking about yet, but you've got a couple of nerves located as well as blood vessels in there. Making our way laterally here, you can see the part of the adductor longus muscle. You can see part of the pectineus muscle, and then this very large muscle located here. Whoops, that's the toe. Right there is your rectus femoris muscle of the leg. All right, down here at the bottom of the leg, so the last few things here on the ventral side, you've got the gastrocnemius muscle, so the calf muscle is located here. And then next to that is the soleus muscle. Sorry for the shade there. The soleus muscle. as well. So there's just a couple of muscles to take a look at, on the lower leg. Go ahead and name this muscle, located right here, this muscle right here. Go ahead and name this muscle, located right here, this muscle right here. And go ahead and label and identify this muscle, located right here, this muscle. All right, hopefully you can see this. I'm gonna try and get my shadow out of the way here. So what we're seeing here are numerous types of traps muscles, trapezius muscles. And you can see there are several different, you can see the directions of the muscle fibers in a mink, lots of trapezius muscles for their upper back, shoulders, and essentially back of the neck. Okay, making our way over to the arm here. I'm just gonna sit down real quick, take away my shadow. We can see more parts of the triceps as we are looking on the lateral and dorsal views. And then we're gonna make our way onto the limb here. So flipped around, let me see if I can get my camera over there. So you can see pulled up there, that's the brachioradialis, so attaching from the other side. Next is the extensor carpi radialis longus. I'm gonna try and get myself in here right here. That, where my probe is extensor carpi radialis brevis. Then we have the two digitorums. We have extensor digitorum communis, and then lateralis. Then we have extensor carpi ulnaris, so wrapping around from the other side, and then our flexor carpi ulnaris, which is located right here, that big flat muscle, which we also saw on the ventral or medial side. All right, here we go. So we're taking a look at the back of our mink. You can see here on this muscle that we have pulled away, that's the latissimus dorsi muscle, and we can see it still intact over here. Then we can take a look at our three main spinal muscles. I'm trying not to get my shadow on here. Sorry, the sun is making its way through here. So you've got the spinalis closest to the midline. You have the longissimus running all the way down. So spinalis, longissimus, and then you have the iliocostalis. So let me see if I can do something a little better with that. My bad. So spinalis here. Running down, you can see it ends much shallower up here. Then we can go back up and we can follow the longissimus here, a much longer muscle heading down the back, and then we can trace the iliocostalis out there peripherally, the most lateral of those. Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay, so here we are on the dorsal side of the thigh. So this kind of shredded meat muscle here is your bicep femoris, so finishing out those hamstrings that we looked at before. This muscle right up here is the tensor fasciae latiae muscle. And then you can see here basically is that fascia, what we would call in us the IT band or the iliotibial tract that runs down there essentially to the knee. And then lastly here we have this muscle right here. That is your gluteus maximus or your largest butt muscle. All right, here we are back. Whoops, tail in the way. Here we are back at the lower leg. Let's take a quick peek over here. We have pulled away the tibialis anterior there, and then behind that we have extensor digitorum longus in the leg foot. All right, and then obviously soleus and gastrocnemius again back here. Muscle located right here. Go ahead and name that one. And go ahead and name this muscle located right here. This muscle right here. All right, let's take a look into the arm here. Sorry, a little less sun now. Got the umbrella up. We're good to go. And we're looking at what's called the brachial plexus. So these little wormy things are nerves. You can see in color dyed. The arteries usually show up the best. That is the brachial artery located in the upper arm here. Okay. So what we're looking at here is our brachial plexus nerve. So this is our axillary nerve, followed by our radial nerve. All right, here's our median nerve, and then down here is our ulnar nerve. So I usually remember it by arm U. All right, axillary, radial, median, and ulnar for those nerves. Okay, let us identify this nerve here. This nerve here, you are identifying this nerve. What is that blood vessel? What is that blood vessel? Cut in to our, started cutting into our mink, and here we can see this is the trachea, and I've cut above the larynx so that we can look at a couple of cool structures in there. Just going to pick this up really quick and turn it on its side. You can see a flat structure behind it that's kind of the muscle-y color. That is the esophagus, so that is smooth muscle, and notice how flat it is in comparison to the trachea. You can see you know, kind of the bony ridges there. You can see those C pieces of cartilage making up the trachea, and that's a hugely important piece, right, for that patency of our trachea. Let's take a look inside here. So what we can do is I'm going to take my probe. Sorry, again, I'm doing this all by my lonesome. Nobody else wants to come near the mink but me. So I'm just going to put my probe in, and let's see which pathway we go down. There we go. So we have, hang on. So we have the esophagus with that probe inside of it. So that went down that pathway. Let me see. Oh, bear with me. And let me see if I can get that to go into the trachea as well. Hold on, you're going to look at my backyard here for a hot second. There we go. All right, so now I'm in the trachea. So you can see that bend there. Here's where my probe is. Now I'm in the trachea. And so what's deciding all of that? Well, let's take a closer look inside. So you can see what looks like a kind of a tongue on the inside. That is the epiglottis. Okay, that is the epiglottis, which was that structure that we had talked about before, to be able to make that decision. Let me cut into that and we'll take a look at it again. Okay, so we are taking a closer look at the epiglottis here that I've cut through. You can see the opening to the trachea there, but this, where my thumb is on and I'm pushing down, that is the epiglottis. And so you can see as that little tongue would go and cover that space, it would cover up the opening for the trachea and prevent food from entering into the lungs and head it down to the esophagus and the stomach for digestion. Okay, you're going to identify this structure right here that the probe is pointing to. Identify that structure. All right, here we go. So we have separated out this a little bit better. I've cleaned off the pericardial sac. There sits the heart inside your mink. So just taking a look at the heart in situ, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it out so we can take a better look at the lungs, which obviously you can see are sitting on either side. So there's your superior vena cava coming in. You can see the aorta here and its multiple branches that are heading up and anterior. And then if we lift the heart up a little bit, if I can do it, let's see if I can get that without my finger being in the way. We can see here, sort of, this is the inferior vena cava coming out very large and very thick. Let me see if I can just, there you go. There it is. There's your inferior vena cava and obviously some lobes of the lung. So I'm going to extract out the heart so we can follow the trachea down into the lungs and take a look at some bronchi. All right, so here is the extracted heart. So pretty tiny. And again, if we were to kind of make it the size of its paw fist, it's roughly about that size. Here you can see your aortic, your aorta, opening to the aorta. You can see the opening to the superior vena cava, and then you can see there the inferior vena cava connection. You can see some of the coronary veins and coronary arteries on the heart as well. The latex dye has made their way in there. And then you can see the atria and the auricles on the anterior portion of the heart. All right, here we go into the lungs. So on the left side, you have 2 lobes. Here's one, and there is your other. And then if we go to the right side here, you can see 1, 2, the top, 1, 2. See a small third right here, and then a fourth. If we dig a little inside, we can follow the trachea to, I'm gonna see if I can hold this, to its carina here, to that branching point. There's your main or primary bronchi heading into the left lung, and there's your main or primary bronchi heading into the right lungs. You're going to identify this structure here in blue. You're going to identify that blood vessel in blue. All right, so go ahead and identify this structure right here. There's your view of the mink, so you can see, and there is your structure you are identifying, this structure here. The kid's favorite part, once we get past, the thoracic cage, we take a look at this structure right here. That is the diaphragm. You can see I'm really pulling on it. It's not really moving. It's a pretty tough structure. Again, that kind of umbrella or blanket shape. And that separates your thoracic from your abdominal cavity. You can see, your little fat pockets. You can see the fat that's embedded onto the omentum that sits on top of the intestines. Let's take just a quick orientation, and then I'll start pulling some things out and looking at them more individually. So all of these structures here, that's all liver. We could dig through this and there would be bazillions of pieces of liver, okay? This smushy part right here, I don't know if you can see that bubble happening. All right, that's the gallbladder. So it's kind of wedged in within the liver, but smushy like that. You can see it bubble up. That's got bile inside. So that's your gallbladder. All pieces of the liver. This is your omentum. All right, so I'm going to start to move some of that a little bit. And this usually all gets pulled out, and I'll do that next. You can see the spleen sitting over here on the side. That's the spleen sitting there in the structure, kind of wraps around. It looks like some dry, like mud. That's your spleen. And then we're looking at intestines here. So I'm going to clean up the intestines, and then we'll take a look at some of that. All right, here we go into the digestive organs. Let's take a peek here. So I'm going to just kind of push the liver up a little so we can find our friend, the stomach, which is what you're looking at right here, what my finger just laid over. That is the stomach. It is going to narrow down to what's called the pylorus, which is here, and that's going to become the duodenum, or the first portion of the small intestine. And then as you can see here in this mess, I can follow this along with my finger, and I'm not letting go. I'm just following these little branches of our small intestine, and you would follow that through the jejunum, which is the bulk of this, and you would follow that to the end, which is the ileum. Eventually you're going to get to what's called the large intestine, or the colon, and you would have a ascending, a transverse, and a descending portion of the colon that would then wrap around into this end portion of the colon. And there's actually, feels like there's a little bit of something in there as well. Okay, where my thumb is pointing, this structure right here kind of looks a bit like a bumpy flat banana. That's the pancreas, one of the accessory structures. So those of you that are familiar with things like diabetes, insulin, sugar levels, this is the organ that regulates those sugar levels with insulin and glucagon production and regulation via our hormone system. Identify this structure here. So underneath the liver, this structure here, that eventually heads into this. So this structure right here, identify that. All right, you're gonna identify this structure right here, this structure right here. Again, notice the hinge there by me poking it. Identify that structure there. That this, and this, identify what that is, that structure of the mink. Here we go into the last couple of segments here that we'll take a look at. So we have a kidney here. So kidney beans are named for kidneys because they look like kidney beans. That's what kidneys look like. You can also see this little string. That's called the ureter. So that transmits urine from the kidney then down to this structure right here, which is the bladder. And you have one on each side. So you have a second kidney right over here. And there is our second kidney bean right in there. I just didn't dig this one out as nicely. So there's your kidney on that side. This is a female mink. So what we're taking a look at right here, this structure right here that kind of looks like a Y are her reproductive structures. So the line portion of the Y that my finger just went over would be the uterus. And then you have the uterine horns. In women, we would call these tubes, in human women, we'd call them fallopian tubes. Now we're going to track this fallopian tube on this side. Got some fat bodies there. We're going to track it all the way up to right here. Where you have this little bean structure right there. Get it focused better. There you go. That is an ovary. And that is where the female's eggs are stored until they are released and they travel down those tubes. If it's fertilized, then this uterus right here, this tiny little thing, expands to hold that child or that baby mink in this case. There you go. Here, this is structure right here. Here's the view of the mink. Please identify this structure right here. All right, go ahead and identify this structure right here. All right, this structure right here in the mink. This structure right here. And identify this structure within the mink. This structure within the mink.